In parts 1 and 2, we saw how Martin Sandberger, a gifted lawyer from a wealthy background, went on to head Einsatzgruppen 1A in the Baltic states, was put on trial for war crimes at Nuremberg after the war and received a death sentence for his complicity in the murder of thousands of people. That death sentence was confirmed by Lucius D. Clay. After the verdict was pronounced, the convicts of the Einsatzgruppen trial were transferred to the Landsberg War Crimes Prison to serve their sentences or be executed. Curiously enough, this is the same prison where Hitler had been held after the failure of the beer hall putsch. Those sentenced to death had to wear red jackets, and therefore were commonly called the Red Jackets. All but one of those convicted at the Einsatzgruppen trial submitted requests for clemency. They were all refused by the American military governor Lucius D. Clay in March 1949. However, 4 years after the war, a lobbying campaign for these mass murderers began. Cardinal Joseph Frings from Cologne and Johannes Neuhausler, Bishop of the Archdiocese of Munich and Freising, were particularly active. The latter had even been imprisoned in Sachsenhausen, so was no friend of the Nazis. Even the Vatican expressed a positive opinion on overturning the death sentence. Theophil Wurm, regional bishop of the Evangelical Church in Württemberg, represented the Protestants. Together with Neuhausler, he founded the Christian Prisoners' Aid in 1949. They persevered in trying to get the death sentences overturned, despite receiving legal advice not to proceed, as the Einsatzgruppen were, and I quote, the heaviest burden on the German name in the world for decades. The support of the churches in fighting for the lives of a handful of mass murderers stands out in contrast to the silence when it came to the lives of the millions of their victims only a decade earlier. Various lawyers also joined in, and it would appear that despite the suffering that National Socialism had brought to the German people, public opinion was opposed to executing the criminals. After the founding of the Federal Republic of Germany in May 1949, Chancellor Konrad Adenauer appealed to US High Commissioner for Germany, John J. McCloy, at the end of February 1950 to suspend the executions after the abolition of the death penalty as enshrined in the basic law of the Federal Republic, and to commute the sentences to prison terms. Even from the US there was pressure to commute the sentences. This came particularly from opponents of the Truman government, people like Senator William Langer of North Dakota or Senator Joseph McCarthy of Wisconsin. Langer particularly intervened for Sandberger, writing to Truman that executions apart, Sandberger had done his duty in Russia, adding, and again I quote, "Some of his decisions must have caused him as much anguish as your decision to drop the atomic bomb." Sandberger's death penalty was overturned on the 31st of January 1951 and commuted to life imprisonment. This did not satisfy, however, Sandberger's supporters. They now started lobbying for his release. These supporters included Federal President Theodor Heuss, Vice President of the Bundestag Carlo Schmid, Prime Minister of Baden-Württemberg Gebhard Müller, and Bishop Martin Haug. Sandberger's father lobbied Federal President Heuss to take the matter up with US Ambassador James Conant. Carlo Schmid, head of the SPD parliamentary group in the Bundestag, and before the war, Sandberger's professor, claimed that he was a hard-working, intelligent and talented lawyer who, had it not been for National Socialism, would have become a decent civil servant. On the 9th of January 1958, Sandberger was released from Landsberg prison. After release, Sandberger found employment with the Lechler Group. This company makes nozzles for spray technology. You can find them on the internet. They have a very good website. They are based today in Ulmer Straße, Metzingen. Then, in 1958, they just moved to Feuerbach, a district of Stuttgart. It would seem that Sandberger had been studying tax law whilst at Landsberg, or at least that is the excuse the company managing director offered, and I personally believe that is just an excuse. I find it difficult to believe that somebody with a life imprisonment is going to be studying tax law, and certainly wouldn't have been it when he was under waiting for his death sentence to be carried out. I think the reason that some people tried to support him was because they had agreement with his political ideologies. Sandberger was summoned to the Einsatzgruppen trial in Ulm in 1958 and was questioned at various times from 1960 by the Central Office for Nazi Crimes in Ludwigsburg. In May 1970, the Stuttgart Public Prosecutor's Office started an investigation about the shooting of Jews, communists and parachutists in Estonia. The killing of an officer who had fired at a picture of Hitler whilst inebriated, and the murder of 1,400 to 1,500 Jews in Kalevi Liva. Back in the spotlight, Sandberger needed a lawyer, and he found the right one in Fritz Steinacker, noted for defending Nazis. Suddenly, the healthy Sandberger had all sorts of problems. Abnormally high blood pressure, losing his sight. He was at the risk of a stroke. And the one image I get at this point is that one you may have seen in the film Casino, when the gangsters are brought into the court and they're all at death's door, it would seem. In Sandberger's case, well, he may well have been at death's door, but he managed to live another 40 years. But as it happened, developing these health problems was totally unnecessary. As Sandberg had been tried and condemned at Nuremberg, there was no longer a case to answer. The Stuttgart public prosecutor wrote in a letter dated 13th of July 1972 that the investigations against the accused Sandberger had been concluded by the military tribunal 23 years earlier. There was no longer a case to answer to. This is not, though, just the fault of the Stuttgart public prosecutor, because the law of the transfer of power from the Americans to German civilian authority specifically stated that person couldn't be tried for the same thing twice. Sandberger then slipped into obscurity. When Der Spiegel found him, he was living in a Christian retirement home. Here he had what is described as a 2.5-room apartment, which cost €2,519 for the base price per month. However, residents that needed it could also opt for a 3-course menu between sauna, physiotherapy, and having their shopping brought to them. Sandberger had the food brought to his room. A physiotherapist came to visit him also around 3 in the afternoon. In between, he read with a magnifying glass, or once a week had somebody read to him. The lady usually read him something edifying from the Bible. Der Spiegel asked him if he felt ashamed after all these years. To quote the magazine, "The old man in the armchair, the last surviving ringleader in the greatest genocide in history. He was silent and moved his body around as if contemplating something. Then he said, 'I don't want to talk about it.'"